We're really excited to talk to you guys today about using data and data culture to make sizable impact. As David mentioned, we run a company called Data Culture, which focuses on empowering organizations to solve problems and build lasting data culture using their existing data, their existing talent, and a really strong problem-solving methodology that we are going to speak more about in just a couple minutes. But first, a little bit more on us.
So David did such a good job with my intro. I don't think I have to say much, but I'm Leah Weiss. I'm half of data culture to Gabby's other half, and I joined WeWork as an early employee. I arrived there before there was a data team, and have essentially spent the past 7 years building and scaling the data team there, going from a couple of lonely analysts to a team of over 100 engineers, data scientists, and analysts. Eventually, after I kind of built out the BI infrastructure there, I was really excited about this idea of getting data more into internal products and taking a product lens to data. So I built out the data product team at WeWork and eventually needed some help on the data visualization side to tell more compelling visual stories with data. And that's where I convinced Gabby to join me, luckily. And from there, we've kind of formed this partnership that has led to many interesting places.
Yeah, again, David gave a really good intro, but just to kind of finish the story, I joined WeWork to lead data visualization engineering, and Leah and I did build out that function. We hired some amazing data visualization engineers and told a lot of stories. But the most empowering work we did while at the company was creating a global data innovation program that brought people from across the business together to learn about how to access the company's data and solve $10 million problems using that data. And we'll return to that again in just a moment.
So we're going to spend a good amount of time today thinking about this idea of the $10 million problem. And it's sort of an aspiration. And the question we want to put forward is, what would it look like if every single data project that you took on at your organization could guarantee that it would add $10 million of value to your business? So we know you probably work at organizations of different sizes. You can scale this number up or down, kind of depending on where you are. The number is not so much important as kind of this idea that we want to think about data problems in terms of business impact, and we want to make sure that every project we tackle is meaningful and sizable enough to really change the course of your business.
It seems really, really simple, and everybody does seem to care a lot about data today. But when they get to this problem, okay, why aren't we using data enough? We want to build data culture. They often start with, okay, we need more data. That's how we'll get better insights. We need more data pipelines. Let's collect more data, and then we'll be more data driven. And after that, they realize, okay, well, we need more dashboards, because with all of this data, how are we to see these insights without visualizing them? So they build many, many dashboards, hundreds and thousands of dashboards visualizing the information. And then if that doesn't work, they start hiring more data engineers. If only we had more data engineers, they could then model the data and we would be more insightful. The company would be more data driven. But this doesn't always lead to actual revenue or changes in the bottom line or creating a true data driven culture. And we've tried to explore why that is in a lot of different ways and with personal experience. Most people say today that only 30% of the decisions they're making are informed by data. And Jennifer from Forrester, who's speaking, she just finished speaking now, has a lot of statistics on this. And there's also a lot of information on how 50% of dashboards or more are never used. And if you've been on a business intelligence team, if you've worked with data at your organization, you're probably familiar with this. So how can we change it? How can we flip these numbers? Because they are strikingly low and disappointing.
So our interpretation of this problem in terms of why so many data solutions aren't used in the way they're intended is that most data projects have this solution first approach. People are asking for specific solutions before they're kind of explaining the problem and quantifying the problem. I mentioned I was on the business intelligence side for a long time. I did a lot of executive reporting. I've built a lot of dashboards. Some of them use, many of them not. And it always kind of works in the same way, where you have a stakeholder, an executive who's really excited about using data, really hungry for this data, and wants to see it in a really specific way. And they get pretty prescriptive about the way they want to see this data, even down to, columns and rows sometimes. And you do that work on a really tight deadline, you turn it around, you implement definitions that are tricky to implement, and then you discover that the solution that they had in mind isn't actually the thing that's going to make a difference in the business, but you just worked really hard to produce it. So that's one example that I'm really familiar with, but you may live in this world where you hear similar things all the time. So maybe you have a stakeholder who says things like, we don't segment our customers, that's a problem. We can't predict churn, or we're not collecting enough data on customer sentiment or anything else. So what's good about this is that you have someone who cares about using data. They want to kind of integrate it into whatever process they're working in, but there's some solution bias here. So in the case of we don't segment our customers, really someone's asking you to build a segmentation model. The solution is kind of in the statement. We can't predict churn. Someone's asking you to build a churn predictor. We don't collect enough data. Maybe you want to survey your customers more, or do some NLP analysis on sentiment. And you might have a really talented team of data scientists who can implement these things. I think in all of these cases, it would be a pretty sizable project. It would take some time. But the problem here is that we don't get a sense of the business impact of any of these. And we're talking about solutions before we've aligned on the problem. So our very kind of ambitious take on how things would work in a perfect world is this: before anyone writes a single line of code, the problem should be defined and quantified in terms of business impact. And I think that the business impact part of this is really important, because I think sometimes data teams think of themselves as a bit removed, or operationally are a bit removed from the needs of the business. And their goals are more about building data capabilities, building data teams, getting the right data stack set up. And that distance between the goals of the data team and business impact is sometimes what creates that gap between products that never get off the ground and really good work that isn't integrated into the business.
Yeah, we feel really strongly that with the growth of data teams and more people investing in this function, it's confusing where it should sit. And when it's a part of the technology organization, it's often too separate from what's going on in the business. And data as a function, it's information. And the only way to make it truly valuable is if it's closely tied to what's going on in the rest of the company. So depending on how large your organization is or where your data team sits, it could really impact how data-driven the organization is. And we'll try to give you some tips on how to ensure success there.
Again, we're saying this as though it's obvious and easy to do, and we know that it's not in practice. So we want to kind of go through some of the obstacles to creating this kind of $10 million problem landscape. The first one is that, as we mentioned, data teams don't always know the problem. Organizationally, they might be separate. They might not have enough business context. They might be working on things that aren't closely tied to the goals of other teams. And they don't necessarily go to get that extra context before they start a project because they want to get building. By definition, that means that data projects really do require a cross-functional, multidisciplinary approach to be successful. You need to get people in the room together who might not work together, who might not know that much about the skills they use in their day-to-day. The other thing is people are inclined to do what they're best at. Data people love to build data solutions. They want to use new technologies. They want to try out new models, that they want to tinker. That's kind of what they love to do. They're not necessarily incentivized to pause before they start building and build some other expertise or build relationships before they get going. And the last one, and I really don't think this can be underestimated, problem statements are really difficult to write well. They're really time consuming. And it's often the part of the project that people want to skip. They want to get to the build. They want to get to the fun part. They want to prove to their manager that they're, moving with velocity and getting things done. So people often skip that step thinking it will save them time, when in the end, it will probably cause them a lot of pain and a lot of wasted time down the line.
So our approach has been these kind of 4 pillars. First of all, data literacy, and we've kind of started talking about that. These programs that bring together people from around the organization to learn technical skills, but actually understand this problem statement methodology. How do you think about problem definitions? How do you attach those definitions to revenue amounts? And then use those to structure your data product solutions. We also care a lot about multidisciplinary teams and breaking down these silos and making sure people from all different departments can access data, solve problems using data, and give their opinion as these problem statements develop. It's really, really important that you have different voices in the room, and it also allows for much more creativity when it comes to solution building. And on the solution building side, we care a lot about having a human-centered design approach, building products that fit neatly into a user's current workflow, and not just introducing an entirely new application that's going to slow them down even more, or a dashboard that they would never look at in their busy day. And finally, we care about rapid prototyping. We want to build solutions quickly and then worry about kind of implementing the full-on product later. So in most of our programming, we actually spend the bulk of time defining problems and then 2 or 3 days or slightly longer rapidly prototyping a solution using existing data, existing talent, and existing tools. And we found that that's really successful.
We're going to bring it back to the $10 million problem, and we will give you some examples of how we surface these problems and work really hard to kind of quantify them and make them concise. Before we do that, we want to kind of share with you a checklist for how you can evaluate a problem statement. And we're going to show you examples. You can use this checklist to kind of keep us honest and make sure that we're kind of meeting our own criteria. But in our minds, a good problem statement, a really effective problem statement, clearly quantifies the opportunity. It's very obvious as soon as you read it or as soon as you hear it, what the value is of solving this problem. A good problem statement can propose a problem that can be solved in many different ways. So this is a check to make sure that you're not using that solution bias that we talked about, that you're not being prescriptive about what you build when you propose the problem. And a fun test that we've used is to imagine walking into your executive's office or your VP's office and telling them about this problem. And if they would turn to you and say, "What are you doing here? Go solve it." That probably means that you've communicated the value really well, and it's a good enough problem that they want you to tackle it right away.
So we're going to dive into a couple of solutions at businesses that we've worked with and identified some $10 million or plus problems.
So in this first example, we partnered with an education technology company. And just to give you some context, they have a pretty high-touch application process. It involves many phone calls, many kind of checks, many interviews. And that process also serves as their sales funnel. So when they think about optimizing their sales funnel, they're thinking about this pretty rigorous application process. And when we dug into this sales funnel problem, we wanted to find where the biggest opportunities are. And we developed this problem statement. 40% of our qualified applicants drop off before they schedule an admissions interview. And if we could increase the rate at which qualified applicants scheduled their interviews by just 10%, we could increase revenue by $10.3 million. So what was happening here is they had qualified applicants who submitted an application, showed their interest, showed that they wanted to participate in this program, but because of some friction in the scheduling process, just some back and forth and finding time on your calendar, they never got to the point where they're scheduling that initial admissions interview. That seems like an opportunity that we should definitely tackle. I think it passes the test. If your executive knew about it, they would say, "Go solve this. This is definitely worth it." And we'll show you exactly how we went about solving this problem in a matter of just a few days. So this is the solution that we prototyped that was eventually implemented. And basically what happens here is a qualified applicant applies online, and we use a machine learning model to immediately score their application. And if you're in that subset of applications that we can immediately tag as qualified, you'll get this calendar pop-up where you can schedule your interview in the next step, and you don't have to wait for an email or miss a phone call and do this cumbersome scheduling process. You can schedule it immediately. So the hypothesis there is that we could increase the rate at which these qualified applicants are moving to the next step by 10% and save $10 million.
Cool. So The next example, we have different company, totally different problem on the real estate side.
Yeah, so here we partnered with a really high growth real estate company where construction was a big part of the logistics of their operation. And they often relied on general contractors as part of their build process. So they would have a construction process, they'd get bids from general contractors who would say, this is what the construction project will look like, and here's the cost of all the materials and all of the work that needs to be done. So here's the problem statement we identified. We lose $20 million every year by ordering excess floor leveling materials, which is called float. We learned a lot about the construction process and about construction materials as part of this process. But essentially what was happening here is we analyzed some projects and the cost of construction materials versus what we actually used. And we found that there was one material that we consistently over-ordered and was going to waste. And that was this floor leveling material called float. So literally the material that you put on wood floors to make sure the floors are even.
And the solution was really simple because we had all of the data already. So we had been collecting floor leveling, we had point cloud data for all of the buildings that this company was developing, and we could quite specifically estimate exactly what we needed.
Yeah, so we had these 3D models that we could construct with the data that we had, and we could actually look at a floor by floor level to see how level each of these floors are, and then more precisely estimate the amount of float that we need. So then if you got a bid from a general contractor that said we needed, X amount of float, we could actually say, no, I'm looking at the floors and we need much lower.
And that calculator tool is really, really simple to build when you have the data already. We didn't get any new hires. We didn't collect any more data. And it was then possible for all project managers when working on new projects to clearly estimate that number and just send it off. So the outcome.
So those are just two examples of projects that we've developed and data solutions to $10 million problems we've developed. We think that at the end of a program that we run, not only do you have these amazing $10 million data product solutions that are ready to be implemented, but you also have a group of people who have now been trained and inspired to think about data in a whole new way. And that can become the foundation of the data culture that you want to create in your organization.
And when it comes to data culture, I think a lot of times people can get tripped up thinking, if only every employee in my business wrote perfect SQL and could access my data in a more technical way, then we would all just be more data driven. But that actually wouldn't change the bottom line of your business. And we've seen time and time again, it doesn't help to have too many engineers or too many people building more and more dashboards. What really matters is the breadth of people who understand how to tackle these problems, making sure you have a multidisciplinary community of people who care about data and people who want to use data in their day-to-day work and can do so by structuring things through this problem kind of statement methodology way. And we'll have more content on that. You can find us online. But I think that leads us to the Q&A portion of today.